Okay. Welcome to the Sutlifian Report, Todd. Your article yesterday had some surprising numbers. You wrote, quote, in the first month of 2022, U.S. Border Patrol agents laid hands on more than two full Super Bowl stadiums worth of foreign nationals who crossed the southern border illegally, and this was according to the U.S. Border Patrol apprehension statistics. So how many people are we talking about having entered the United States illegally?
Well, I looked it up, and the Super Bowl the stadium had 70,000 people in it. It was filled. So if you were watching the Super Bowl and were looking around at that stadium, man, that's a lot of people. Just imagine one full stadium of those people crossing the border illegally. That's a lot. Well, imagine twice as many.
Wow.
Two stadiums full, 150,000 people crossed the southern border in one 4-week period. And I was just trying to use that as a way to illustrate just how many people are hitting the southern border now that we know about, that we laid hands on. There's 154,000 altogether in 1 month. And it kind of stacks on. I think I made a reference to Yertle the Turtle, the Dr. Seuss story, where the turtles are stacking up one after another.
Yes.
The guys on the bottom are kind of like, so that's kind of what this is. We've had a lot of Yertle the Turtle months stacking up like that for the last year or more since the Biden administration came in. And we are now well over the greatest number ever recorded of apprehensions at the southern border. It is American history in the making right there. We've never seen anything like this, and it's just starting.
Well, like I agree, it's an insane amount of illegals, but this was just 1 month, and I just correct me if I'm wrong. I read this in your article, and I had to do a double take when I first read it. Like, I know what the title of the article implies; it's right, but you said the numbers went down, and I'm thinking, oh my gosh, what happened? What does your research tell you is the reason for the numbers going down?
Okay, well, first of all, I started the piece out by trying to illustrate how many 154,000 is, but it's really a down number. The numbers have been going slowly declining over the last maybe 5 months. Little by little, the way I say it is that the balloon is slowly deflating because in July, which was the peak of this, we had 219,000. And in August, we had 209,000. So for a period of months there, we were in 200,000 plus in a single month apprehensions. And then it started to kind of come down a little bit to, 180, 185, 175, 170, 160 something. And then now we're at 154. So the numbers are still outrageous, historically, but I'm trying to find a silver lining here because at least the trend line is where I like to see it. I like
going down is a good thing.
I'd like to see a trend line doing this, but I'll take it if it's just kind of doing this. Yeah. Anything other than this for the border, for the southern border, and so I'm trying to theorize about what's going on, and I have a theory about what's happening that I think most people in our camp and in the on the Republican side of the aisle, might have a difficult time kind of digesting that this is a little bit of good news that the Biden administration is doing something good with the border. And I'm just going to say it because truth is truth. The numbers are going down. My theory for why the numbers are going down has to do with air deportation operations that the Biden administration very quietly, secretively ordered in August, which was at the very, very pinnacle, the very peak of the crisis of 220,000, 210,000, all of a sudden the Biden administration was ordering that Guatemalan women and children, the very demographic that is making up the majority of, or at least half of all of those apprehensions, are being loaded onto aircraft and flown all the way back to Honduras and Guatemala City and El Salvador and southern Mexico every single day. And that's been going on for about 5 months. By my count, there have been about 1,100 flights.
Wow.
Altogether. And if you figure 150, 200 people on board each flight, you can do the math. That's a big, big number. It might be 100,000 people, depending on how many they can put on one of those flights. And the reason why that the tactic of air deportation is so likable and appealing to me is because there's really no other or very few other weapons in the arsenal that are more effective at deterring migrants from coming than the thought that they might end up back on an aircraft back home after spending $10,000 on their smuggling. And so what I'm positing here, and I think I need another couple of months to really kind of solidify my theory. I could be wrong about this, but I noticed in the data, when you dig into the data, the Biden administration has been deporting two main nationalities that are the nationalities with the most percentage of border crossings, which are Central Americans, meaning Hondurans and Guatemalans for the most part, and Haitians. Remember the Del Rio migrant camp?
Yeah.
Yeah. Well, the air deportations are targeting those nationalities mainly. And when you look in the data, you can see that the number of Central Americans that have been crossing over since the airlift started has been doing this.
So there is a gradual decline. It's
pretty
not
steep. Let me just give you an idea. In July and August, there were about 95,000 Central Americans that were apprehended at the border out of the 200,000, almost 50%. In January, it was 34,000. They've declined from 95,000 to 34,000, which is kind of right where the numbers were before there was a crisis. It's a pre-crisis number. Clearly, something is happening with these Central Americans. They're ending up back on their tarmacs at home.
That's got to be disappointing.
And here's the other thing is one of the reasons why the numbers have stayed elevated is because we've seen a very steep increase in the number of Venezuelans crossing. 25,000 in December, 25,000 in November, compared to like a year ago, 100, 200. I mean, it's just like this. The Venezuelans are just shooting skyward. Well, about 2 weeks ago, the Biden administration cut a deal with the Colombian government to take air repatriation flights filled with Venezuelans. And they started flying Venezuelans home about a week ago. So now the numbers of Venezuelans are shooting up like this. Boom, air repatriation. When those Venezuelans on their way get a wind of this, they're going to think twice, 3 times about crossing the border because nobody wants to get sent all the way back to Colombia. They can't be sent to Venezuela because the Maduro government, we don't have diplomatic relations. So we have to go with a friendly government. But the fact that the Biden administration went so far out of its way to establish a repatriation agreement with that country very recently, and by the way, with absolutely zero coverage, not a single news story. You can't find a news story about this anywhere. Tells me that next month and the month after, we're probably going to see those Venezuelan numbers go down. Now, one other thing I'll mention about my theory is the Haitians. Uh, the Del Rio crisis, the migrant camp crisis, you remember that. We all remember
Yes.
that. It was crazy. The way the Biden administration killed that thing out was they started doing air repatriations of the Haitians in that camp, not all of them, but enough, all the way back to Port-au-Prince. And I was in Mexico across the river when that happened. And there was an exodus of Haitians running from the camp right into the Mexican side. And I interviewed, and I'm like, "Why are you guys running?" And one after another said they're repatriation flights. We don't want to end up on one of those flights. So they were able to close the camp by just doing repatriation flights. Half of the Haitians in that camp fled to Mexico and stayed there for like 2 months. So then the Biden administration quit the flights because their left wing liberal, Bernie Sanders group, were beating them over the head. How dare you do this? It's the Trumpian that you're doing this kind of thing. And in fact, the American diplomat to Haiti resigned in protest over this thing. The ACLU has all been out of shape. The SPLC, the Catholic Charities, they were all furious. So they stopped the flights back to Haiti.
But Todd, I got to ask you.
Yeah.
I mean, as much as you're one of those people who truly believes national security for our borders, especially, is not something political. It's just the right thing to do. You wrote about it in your book, America's Covert Border Wars. I mean, I honestly thought it was crazy, and then I read your statements on this, and I was really impressed, and you really proved that point. So deportations, that's not just a Republican tactic, is what you're saying as well.
The Biden administration is using it because it works and they know it works. And and they need to get something done on the border because the midterm elections are coming. And if you look at the polling, we can look at the same polling that those guys read, although they probably have even more detailed Democratic Party kind of polling that's going on. They are seriously exposed on this issue. All of the polling shows that this issue at the border is going to kill them, and they know it. And I believe that the reason that they're doing a Republican-y, whatever you want to call it, a Trumpian policy here, a draconian, cruel, mean-spirited, all the things that they accuse Trump of doing, is because it works.
That's that's exactly what you say in your book.
Yeah.
It's national security for our borders, and it really doesn't matter which political party you're part of. If it works and it protects our borders, it's the right thing to do.
Well, and I'll tell you something. You know, if you remember this goes back a little ways to 2014, where there was an unaccompanied minors crisis at the southern border under Obama. The reasons for it are too complicated to get into here. I'm not going to bother you with it, but we had 70,000 unaccompanied minors all of a sudden pour over the Texas border in 2014 in a period of a couple of months. And the Obama administration was like, we have to stop this. This is crazy. And the way they stopped it was with, guess what? Air deportation flights. They filled ICE airplanes with kids and flew them all back to the tarmacs. And it stopped almost overnight. The second they started doing air repatriation, it ended.
Yeah, it's a good demonstration. Again, we're talking about
Democrats.
Doesn't matter what party you're in. If it works, it works.
It works. Now, you can argue that, and I do in my piece. I explain that I believe that what's happening is that they're worried about the midterm election, and I think that they're also very worried about 2024. The party is worried about 2024 with this border stuff. They can't have the polling is just clear cut. Middle America, Democrats, independents hate this thing that's going on at the border. It's clear cut. by huge majorities. People hate what's going on down there. And I think that they are planning to try to get the numbers down without making a bunch of fuss about it that pisses off their left wing. But the left wing people are walking out of the White House. They're resigning over this. There have been three senior level, super left wing, liberal progressive advisors on immigration that in the last month have resigned suddenly. And they're not saying why. And I believe that the reason why are these air deportation flights. I think it just sent them over the edge. But it also indicates that more pragmatic, election savvy, poll savvy, less ideological people interested in Democrats interested in just power are the ones that are starting to prevail on these air deportation flights. So, more power to them, except for I hope they lose personally. But, I do want to see the border under some kind of control to kind of get it back to normal. And I don't really care who does it. Or for what reason, as long as the numbers stay down like that for the rest of his term.
Well, one of the things that you talked about recently on Epoch Times, by the way, that was an outstanding interview. I want to say thank you for that.
Thank you.
And thanks to Epoch Times for doing that with you. You mentioned one thing I thought was really interesting about inconsistency in policy, and you're kind of getting into that now. But I was wondering if you could speak to the inconsistency in policy and how that's keeping the numbers high.
Well, keep in mind what I just said, that there are pragmatists that are kind of, realpolitik. We're looking at the polls. I don't care about all these immigrants. We want to maintain power. And then you have the truly ideological progressive liberals in there who seized immigration policy at the very beginning and caused this migration crisis. They caused it directly without any question. They did this. There was nothing other than their policy choices that did this. And I think that one of the things that they did was that they started just allowing in hundreds of thousands of family units and resettling them across the country. When the people down trail saw that happening, they came to join in. We're going to get a piece of that action. The midnight flights, those are happening even now from, ICE Air. Even while they're deporting Guatemalans back south, they're still also bringing them into all four corners of the United States and resettling them in American cities. So, how do you reconcile this? And the way I reconcile it is that you have these two different factions that are both getting their way at the same time for the moment. I think that that's what's happening. Now, I just was in Tapachula, Mexico last month for about 8 days, and I was interviewing a lot of Central Americans down there. This is on the border with Guatemala, and I also interviewed a ton of Haitians. The Haitian airlift had just been restarted, and every single Haitian that I met, I asked, hey, what's your plan now with these air deportation flights targeting you? And they're mad. Every one of them is just like, I can't believe Biden's doing this to us. He's terrible. He's a terrible person. But I am not going anywhere near the southern border. I won't go near it until this is over. I can't end up back in Haiti. So I saw with my own eyes, I've got a whole bunch of interviews and I've written about them and I've quoted them with their interviews. I am not going to the United States. I'm not crossing the border. And so we're hardly seeing any Haitians crossing the border right now. When I ask Central Americans, though, about the same thing, I'm like, you're aware that the Biden administration is sending people all the way back to your home country today, yesterday, tomorrow, every day, several flights a day. And they're like, well, that's true. We're aware of that, but they're also letting a whole lot of us in. So I'll take my chances. And so for the Central Americans, the conflict in the White House is still giving them enough of a high odds of getting maybe 50-50 that it's worth risking the border crossing for them.
Wow.
So as long as those midnight air flights are still bringing them into the interior of the country, you're still going to have a large number crossing that are willing to take their chances. And that's the problem. Those resettlement flights, that policy of rewarding all of these thousands and thousands of Central Americans and everybody else with legalization and resettlement is going to keep those numbers really high. The border crisis is not going to end until that ends. That stuff has to end. And then just do repatriation flights, and this thing would be over like in a week.
My last question today, Todd, is I have some friends running for Congress, and what advice can you give them that needs to be done to fix this issue? Because we have a lot of young there'll be young people in Congress that want to make things better and more secure for America. What can they do?
One thing, if you could pick, if I could pick for them one thing that they could do when the midterms come, and especially if they take the chambers, they have to legislate a fix to the Flores settlement. That's they call it the Flores loophole. I don't mean to. This is important though, because the reason why the migrant crises of the last 2 or 3 migrant crises at the border that we've had all involve women and children is because of the Flores settlement, which is a 20-year-old court case that ended up limiting how long you can keep a migrant child in custody to under 21 days. And then in 2015, they amended it. A judge in California, of course, the Ninth Circuit, amended it to include the parents too. So family units that come in get right in through the Flores settlement loophole. We can't hold them for longer than 20 days, and that's why they're all coming. They are coming because we can't hold them by law. We have to let them into the country. They claim asylum. Well, that can be legislated out of existence. It has to be the Flores settlement has to be legislated out of existence. It's the only way. That's the first thing that anybody has to do.
I think that sounds doable. That's the good news.
You have to have a president that'd be willing to sign it too, though. But
my belief right now is we're heading that way because of who is president. I want to say thank you. Can you tell everybody once again how to follow your work and how to support great organizations like the Center for Immigration Studies?
Right. Well, so most of my work for the Center for Immigration Studies is there at cis.org. And I have a Getter account if you want to follow me on Getter at T Bensman at Getter. I still have a Twitter account if you want to go there too, Bensman Todd. And then my book is America's Covert Border War, and that's about the jihadist threat. You and I have talked about this a lot, and that is really kicking up right now too. That's a whole other show. But it's America's Covert Border War.
God bless you, Todd. Thank you for joining us.
Thanks for having me. I appreciate it.
All right. I just got to push. And where's my mouse? All right. And